Out of the different quarterbacks I've watched for this prospect series for the 2014 NFL Draft at quarterback, the most interesting and exciting one for me to watch personally has been Brett Smith of Wyoming. Now, I know a lot of people are not familiar with him. A lot of people do not know his name, and apparently that includes NFL scouts and front office executives and talent evaluators, as Brett Smith was not even invited to participate in the combine, which is something that surprised me quite a bit. Now, he also surprised me, frankly, by declaring for the draft coming out of Wyoming without having a ton of buzz or hoopla about him, even though he's played at a smaller school. I was really surprised. I didn't know if it was necessarily the right decision or not, but it was the decision he made. There's a coaching change going on there, so I can kind of understand it. But when I look at Brett Smith, and I've watched his stuff over the past couple of years, there have been times where I've been very impressed with him. I look at the Nebraska game this year as an example. He went into Nebraska, and I thought he played very, very well. Some of the strengths that he brings to the table, I think he has a very, very strong arm. I think his arm strength is actually quite a bit underrated because people get so caught up in his release and his mechanics in general that they don't realize how much the ball seems to kind of explode out of his hand. It does. He definitely demonstrates the zip on the ball to fit it into tight windows in the short and intermediate area, and he also demonstrates the ability to throw the streak and the deep out and the deep post, make all the required NFL throws with velocity. Not only that, he had, to me, some of the best accuracy that I've seen out of any quarterback prospect for this 2014 draft class. He made some incredible throws in short area, intermediate areas, deep areas, and he did it consistently. It wasn't one of these things where he just flashed it once and then the next two throws were 5 yards off, or he did it twice and then he missed twice. Now, this was a kid to me that relatively consistently demonstrated an ability to throw the ball in the best possible position for his wide receiver or his target to make an athletic football play on it. And he seemed to be able to fit it into those tight windows and really make some big time NFL looking throws. I think his pocket presence is pretty good. He's a kid that stood up tall in the pocket. He understands how to move his feet left or right, be able to extend plays within the pocket without always necessarily having to bail, but he can bail. And I think people that haven't watched him all that closely will not fully appreciate just how good of an athlete this kid is and how mobile of a quarterback he really is and how much of a playmaker he can be with his feet. He's one of the most mobile quarterbacks in this draft class, ladies and gentlemen. Make no mistake about it. He actually surprised me with just how mobile he was and how fluid of an athlete he was. And I think his decision making is relatively good. You know, it's very rare that you'll see a college prospect come in as a quarterback and you see immaculate decision making. You know, sometimes they make good decisions, sometimes they make bad decisions, but he didn't seem to make a lot of terrible decisions to me based off of what I watched from him. On the flip side, there are some weaknesses, some deficiency areas to his game that I did notice. He's about 6'3", maybe 205 pounds. He doesn't have prototype size. I think he has enough size, but he could stand to put some weight on his frame because he's very thin, especially in the lower body. This is a similar complaint you were hearing about Teddy Bridgewater. So I have some concerns about his ability to hold up at the NFL level physically. Another big knock that you'll hear about him, obviously, is mechanics, because his mechanics are interesting to say the least. A lot like maybe a Ryan Nassib in last year's draft class. His mechanics to me were terrible, and Brett Smith's mechanics are terrible from a purely aesthetic standpoint. However, I will say this, mechanically, even though it looks terrible, and even though his arm angle is over here and he doesn't really engage his lower body as part of the throwing motion, he does have a very quick release, which makes his arm strength look that much more than maybe what it even is, because he gets rid of the ball so damn quickly. But he, again, as a pocket passer in the NFL, he could potentially struggle as somebody that has to sit back in the pocket because of his arm angle and because of different things. You know, he might have a propensity to have more batted balls than some other quarterbacks, and he might occasionally have the fumbling issue as well. When I watched him, though, over the past 2 years, I came away very impressed with Brett Smith. I really like Brett Smith. There's a lot to me that kind of jumps out at me and says, hey, you know what? A lot of other NFL draft talking heads and draft nicks might not like him, might kind of buy into that group think of thinking, oh, he shouldn't have declared and all of this and all of that. But what I see is a guy that kind of brings that kind of wild card X factor to the table, and that guy that could do some really good things on the football field with the necessary arm strength and accuracy and mobility to be a dual threat quarterback that is very important to have in today's National Football League. In the description box down below, you'll see the final physical tools grade I gave for him, which was a 71.0. I was actually surprised that it was this high. If his mechanics were better, he would have graded off the charts by comparison to a lot of the other members of this class. He might have been the highest rated quarterback in this draft class. I've become a big fan of Brett Smith, and he's going to be, when I do my quarterback big board, you're going to be surprised how high up on the list he will be. My NFL comparison for him is going to be Brian Hoyer, a kid that sat there for Cleveland early on in the 2013 season and was doing some good things and had the Cleveland Browns believing he was making big plays with his arm and with his feet. And the city of Cleveland, the people of Cleveland, and the players of Cleveland were starting to buy into him. Unfortunately, then he got hurt, which I'm afraid could potentially be the same NFL career trajectory for Brett Smith. But a guy that if you haven't checked out much, you need to check out more, because he played at Wyoming, so he's kind of flown under the radar, but there is a lot there to like, and there is definitely, in my opinion, a future NFL starter there.